All right, thank you very much. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I believe you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. All right, so last week, just to do a quick recap for the set of people that are just joining us, and also to refresh our memory for people that were here last week. So last week we started the business series where we are trying to build an app that everyone can relate with, rather than just random topics on the Power Platform. We are going to be working on a particular real life scenario kind of application where we are going to be using different Power Platform tools like Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, and Co. Just to you know build an end-to-end solution that's that we can use within our organizations. So these use case we have currently is an expense request where people can make requests from the organization about certain requests that they um certain amount. Maybe okay, I need money for a particular thing. I want to use it for transport or feeding or something like that. So I need to request for that amount and get an approval and all of that. So that's basically what this app is meant to do. Yeah, so we started last week by creating. So what we agreed is we are going to be using three major or four tools. So we have our Power Apps, our SharePoint lists, Power Automate, and also Power BI, which we are going to be using much later. So we started with the SharePoint list last week. So the SharePoint list is going to be our data source, more like a database where every request that we have goes into. So we have this expense request where we created some additional different columns to handle different kind of data that we will be needing. Right? We have the expense title, the employee name, which is the employee that is actually requesting for that's that cash. Then we have customer name. So if you are requesting a cash or maybe a particular vendor, so we have that as well. We have expense type, the type of expense. Is it transport? Is it accommodation, feeding and co? Amount, currency, date of expense. So all of these, and like I mentioned last week, we are going to see most likely have additional columns, right? But for now, I think this should work for us for a start. So as time goes on, we need to also create additional columns and all that. So also after creating our SharePoint list, we are able to go back to Power Apps to create our app. We quickly change the color of the background of the screen. Also, we are able to insert the form, which is connecting to our SharePoint. Added request and inserted the form, which automatically populates all the fields we have on our list for us here. So that was where we stopped last week, which we proceed from there this week. We did last week. I don't know if anybody has any that's before we know to that of today. Coming back to
Hello. Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Hello. I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. Network. Okay, I was saying, so one of the things I do normally is, from this point, I try to ensure that, okay, my data, I can actually submit it to a list, right? So which is one of the things I would want us to do from here. So we need to even be sure that, okay, our data is pointing to the right data source and we can submit it. So because of course what we eventually have to do is we need to be updating the list constantly. When I click on submit, my data goes to my data source, which is my SharePoint list. I can update it and all that. So from here, what we need to do is, so let's change. I've inserted a button. I'm just going to name this submit. So I'm changing the text property from here to submit. Of course, I can also go back from, I can see the list of properties here and go to my text and change this to submit or whatever I need to change this to as well. So one of the things I would do here is, so this is the submit button on my unselect button or unselect property. Unselect means when I click on this button, what should happen? So what I want to do is, this form is called form 1. That's the name of this form. So I want you to submit this form 1. So okay, so I'll say submit form. So there is this function that already exists on Power Apps called submit form, and I put the name of the form I want to submit. I open the bracket and close the brackets, and that helps me to submit my form. So my title, let me call this test 1. Employee name, pick from. So with this employee name now, I can search for different any employee within my organization, like we mentioned. Because if you remember last week, we selected the persons field, which I mentioned that this persons field you pick from, the Active Directory, which is you can pick the names of people within your organization from this employee name. So which is what I just did. Um, Customer name, let me say customer 1. Just put in some random data now. As time goes on, we'll start trying to put in like data that makes more sense. Then amount. So in this my amount now, you see that while I'm trying to type in a text, it doesn't allow me. That is because we have selected this amount field to be a number field. So if you recall from our SharePoint list, we are able to select a a data type called number, where we have text, number, choice, and the rest. So that's one of the things I mentioned last week, because we need to restrict the type of data people need to enter, right? So if I had selected text, it means somebody can just come and just put XSAB15, which is not a valid amount, right? So that's why we need to put um a restriction on the type of data that we want here. So currency as well, these are the currency we initially selected last week. So let me say Naira. The date of expense is maybe the dates the expense will be incurred or was incurred, depending on the type of expense. So which means if it's an expense that I already incurred, maybe I already spent the money and I'm asking for a refund, it could be a previous date. And if it's something I'm supposed to use in the future, then it should be a future date. Then manager name, let me check for myself. I select that as well. So attachment as well, I can attach a document, right? I can attach a, so let's say I have a receipt for the request I'm trying to make. I can attach that. So I can attach more than one file actually. So I can attach all of the necessary documents to this and I'll submit. So let's see what happens. Yes, so this I believe has been successfully submitted to our list. So we can confirm that by going to our data source. So if we go to our data source, you see that all the information that were entered just now from our app now comes to our list. Title, the employee name, the customer name, expense type, amount. So you can see that these are all the information I've submitted, that I submitted just now, and everything comes to this list. So it shows as an item on the list. So if I create a new item, it shows on a different row. So I hope that makes some sense. I think somebody is trying to say something. Okay. So any questions so far regarding the submission? Okay. I believe you understand that. So yeah, so we have been able to submit our item on the list. So we'll notice that after submitting, this now shows no item to display. So the way Power Apps works, when you submit a form, it assumes that okay, you are done with that form, except you now have to reset, that form again if you need to resubmit a new one. So what I'll do here first is to so the default mode, like I mentioned last week, so we have these three default mode. So new is when you are trying to submit a new form, a fresh new item on the list. Edit is when you are trying to update an existing item. And view is okay, it's just going to be view only. I'm not expecting the person to update. I just want it to be able to just view the details of a particular request. So that's when we have um the view thing. Okay. So now one of the things I would just do here. So it's showing this no item to display. So what should have happened is when I'm submitting my new. So I'll first change this to edit and change this back to new. I will see that it shows up my form normally back. So one of the things I do is uh there's a property called on success. So we can see on success property, on failure, on reset, and all that. So on success of the form means after I've been able to successfully submit my form, what action should be taken. So I can decide what I want uh, to happen after submission of my form. I can put those functions here. So what I do here is to have something that resets my form. So which is this my form one. Then I say new form to reset my form and set up a new form for me from one. So with that now, once I submit my new form, it automatically shows up a new form after my submission. So one of the things I also do is to have a a success screen. So we can see that we have different screen templates here. So success screen is one of them. So when you are trying to submit a form, I'm sure when you have maybe you are using an app or a web app, just to notify your users that yes, your submission was successful, because like initially when I submitted here, there was nothing prompting me or showing me as a user that this has been submitted. So I don't really know if any action has been taken. So this is just to kind of for it's majorly user experience, right? You need to be communicating to your users to let them know if there is an error, if it was successful and all that. So here what I do here is still on my own success, which means when my first has been successfully submitted, I also tell it to navigate. So it navigates me to that screen 3, which is the success screen. So of course I can always rename this screen to, so let me rename this one for example. So renaming makes it easier for you to know which screen you are trying to reference at every point in time, because you can might build an app that has like several screens. So if you are using screen 1, screen 2, you might really have to start checking which one is which screen. So giving them that name helps you to easily identify that this is what this screen is used for, right? Um, yes, so with that, I'm sure we are fine. We might also want to just insert, a label at the top here, and we put it here and say, we can centralize this, change the color of the text to white. So you can see it's very, very easy to, make all of this modification just like you are editing a Word or PowerPoint document. You can change the font size and all of that. So I can make this bold. I can change the text to say new requests. So that this will be like a header on my on this screen to tell the user that you are trying to make any requests, right? So this now should be fine. Yeah, so we are still going to come back to this to do some tests. So now on this particular screen, um there are still some additional things that I believe we still need to do. Is somebody trying to say something? Okay. So a couple of things that I feel is necessary that we also do here is to um so I might want to pick, so the employee name for example, right? I might want you to pick the name of whoever is currently logged in, so that when you are submitting a request, I don't want you to manually type in your name, right? So any user that is logged in, I want it to automatically pick your name. Just like when you are logged into an app where you already signed in, let's say your Facebook or your Twitter account or something, you see that it shows your name somewhere, maybe at the top or something, to know that this is you that you are currently signing. So when you post anything or you comment, you don't necessarily need to put your name that, okay, I was the one that posted this. It automatically captures that your name. So something similar here as well. If let's say you are building an app, you don't want users to start typing a name to say, okay, I'm the one submitting this. So we need it to automatically pick their name. And because all of this is still integrated, it's still a Microsoft platform, we can connect to the Active Directory to pick the name of the users. You can pick the email and all that. So we can do all that, from here as well. So one of the things we need to first do, which I always advise, is to have, so there is a particular, so from our data sources on the left here, um, there's a particular connector we need, this Office 365 users. So the Office 365 users connector allows you to connect your to users within your environment and pull information. So you can pull information for yourself and even other members of your organization. So with this, I can decide to put something that shows my email address, my name, my picture, my manager, if it's configured on the Active Directory, and all of that. So there are a lot of things you can do with it, which is why I always, use that. So, for example, let me say I want to pull the email of this particular account. So let me just insert a label. So I'll just come here and put Office 365 users because I have already connected that data source, that connector. I can see this option. So if I haven't, I won't see this option that is currently showing up for me, this Office 365 users. It won't show up as part of the suggestions that is I'm currently having because I've not connected that connector. So Office 365 users dot my profile. So you can see a lot of different suggestions that is going to show you manager, my profile, update my photo, and all of that. So if I pick my profile, close the brackets, then dot. So now there are a lot of other information about myself that I can pick from here. I can pick my city. So all of this will need to have been reconfigured from the AD by the admin who created the user account. So your city, company name, country, department, display name, ID, job title, nickname. So a lot of different information about myself or about whichever user is currently logging in. So this is not just about myself. So if I pick um display name, for example, this should show the display name, which is this Power Platform Manager, which is the name of this user account here. So if somebody else comes to this app and logs in, it won't show Power Platform Manager. It will show the display name of that particular user. So I don't need to start manually changing or typing in my name or anything. So this should automatically pick that. I can also pick my email and other information as we just saw the other time. So with this, so what I do is this. So I first set a variable called my profile. So yes, so when you are setting a variable, so let me just quickly explain this. When on Power Apps, you can set a variable. So there are two types of variable you can set. You can set a global variable or a contextual variable. So a global variable is a variable that can be accessed anywhere within your app, right? So which means if I set a variable here, I can access it from any of the screens within my app. So I can reuse it at any point in time. Now, a contextual variable is a variable that is only accessible within a particular context, which is mostly a screen. So if I need to set a variable that I only want it to be accessible, I only want to be able to use that variable on this screen, then I would use a contextual variable. And the difference between setting a contextual variable and um, a global variable is the function you use in setting them. So for setting a global variable, you use set, and for um, a contextual variable, you use to update context. So this is a global variable because I want to be able to use my profile, which I'm trying to set now. I want to be able to use it anywhere within my app. I'm not just restricting it to a certain screen. So I'll set it as a global variable. So this sets my profile of Street5 user, my profile. So with this now, I can, um, if I need to reuse my email or display name at any point in time, I can always use this variable to call out any of the my user attributes that I need. And we'll see how that works here. So, normally if you are using a single line of text, so let me say this customer name. Let me just quickly use this as an example. Okay. So let me first type it. So, we've set a variable here. So instead of this parent.default, I'll just call that my variable, which is my profile. So you can see that it's suggesting which of my attribute do I want to pick. So if I select display name, for example, so this might not show anything because I put this function on start, which means when my app is starting, run all of these functions. So I can have as many functions as I want here, which means while my app is starting, I can tell it to say, get this information, pull all of those information before the app finish loading. So, which is one of the things I've done here to set my profile to this. So now, because I'm in edit mode, that's why I can't find anything here. So I might need to tell it to run on start. So which means to run all the functions that I have on my on start for me, and then my display name should show here. So you can see now that in my customer name, you can now see that's my display name. But that's not what we want. I just wanted to use that to give some explanation. Right. So I'll return this back to parent.default. So here now, one of the things we want to do is the employee name. So this is a little complex. So I'll just um give the little explanation I can. So yes, so like I mentioned, this if it was a single line of text, I can easily just reference um the the my profile dot mail or my profile dot display name or whichever one I want to reference. But for this is a person field. A person field is not as simple as a single line. So a person field is a complex field which will contain different attributes of a particular user. So which means I can have the display name, I can get the email, I can get the department of the person, I can get the picture of that person, all in that single column or that single field, right? So what we need to do here, so I'll just copy some formula here and we'll see what happens. Very complex formula. So but if you need it, I can always provide that. So this is a person's field. So we want it to automatically populate the name of user that is currently logged in. So we'll go to default selected items. So which means by default, what name should be here, right? So I'll just paste this here. Yes. So we can see that this is now showing my name, right? The name of this account that is currently logged in here. So, and this is showing as a person's field. Now, all of this, my long story that I have here is what is actually giving me that because the person's field. So if it was just a single line, I could have referenced the email, could have referenced the display name, so you can see even the job title, the department. But all of this combination of these things forms my um my person's field. So which is why I had to, put all of this information here. So I might not be able to fully explain all of this for now, but I hope it will make sense much later. All right. So yes, so we have our employee name. So if there are other things that you want to pick as maybe the defaults as well, maybe you want to make the date of expense to be okay. So let's quickly try something else. So let's say I want to use my date of expense to be today by default, right? So which means when anybody is filling the form, it should automatically show today as my expense date. So I can also change that. So that will be the default date. I can change it to today. So there's a function already that is called today. So with that, it automatically picks this current date, which is this guy. So then the person can now decide to change it if need be. Then yes, so going back to our employee name, um you can see that this currently shows my name, but I still have the ability to go and remove this and change it to something else. So I can still change this to somebody else's name and assume that this is the person that submitted, right? Even though SharePoint also has a column called created by, which keeps track of the user that's submitted that's our requests, right? So but what we want to do here is to get the name of the person that's actually filled this form. And so if one thing we now need to do is to say, okay, after it has shown my name, um help me. We don't want this to be editable. So I'm sure we have filled forms like that where um there are certain fields that are grayed out. You can't change whatever you have there, even though you can edit the other parts, right? So that's one of the things we want to do here, so that users are not able to make changes to this employee name aspect. So what we need to do, there is a property here called display mode. So display mode, we'll change that to, so there are three different display mode. We have um edit, which is the current one, which allows users to edit. We have disabled, right? So which shows as a grayed out field, as you can see. So with this one now, I can edit, it's just grayed out. Then the third one is view. So view is also more like read only. It just doesn't show as grayed out. It just shows as a view only. So you can see that this is just also, I can also edit this. It's just view only. So whichever one fits your design and all is what you use. But I prefer disabled in this case, so that users know that okay, this part is actually grayed out, and I'm not meant to be able to change this, right? So another option is I might want to even pick their name without showing necessarily showing it on the form, right? So I say, yeah, of course, the person knows his or her name already, but I'm picking the name, and I might just decide to hide this particular data card. So from this part, I have this visible property, which I can toggle to show either on or off. So if I turn this off, it's still going to submit to my list, of course, but it's not going to just be displayed to the user. So with that, I can, keep this uh, from this particular field hidden. So whichever one fits your requirement or design, you can always, use any of that. So I'll still leave it visible for now. Yeah, so, and I mentioned we also have the attachment column, which allows you to, of course, attach, like you can see from here. So if I go back to this guy, I'll be able to see you know, the document I've uploaded. So this is more of a backend thing. So I can see the image that I uploaded, right? So um on a normal day, your users are not supposed to be going directly to your SharePoint list, because this is more like a database. So only you as the admin or the developer is supposed to be coming here, to see what is happening in the backend and all that. So majorly what the user will be interfacing with, like I mentioned last week, we said we have the front end aspect and the back end. So the front end, which is where the user will be communicating with. So all this information that they have on the list, they will still be able to see them from here, right? So, but this one, you can give restrictions to what type of data they can enter, what they can do with the data and all that. So which is why the app is the one they should, majorly have access to. So with this, yeah, I mean there is still a couple of validation that we might also want to do from here. So maybe some rearrangements. Maybe you want to put the currency before the amount. So you can always, select the data card and drag and drop it at any point you want it to be. So if I put this at the top, it comes here and all of that. So yeah, so the yeah, customer name. Okay, expense type. So let me bring this expense type to the top. Okay, so like this customer name, for example. So somebody suggested we have a customer name last week. So in this case, so I'm just trying to also make this so that we can get, different scenarios and how to, implement them. So customer name, it might not be necessary in all cases, right? So let's say um transportation might not be customer. So let's say the only case customer name is applicable is when you select a vendor, right? Maybe you are trying to make a payment to a vendor, you are making requests on behalf of the vendor. Like I mentioned, Power Apps is only accessible for users within the organization. So it's not accessible to your vendor to make their request. So somebody in the organization, will be making the request on behalf of the vendor. So when I select vendor, let's say that's the only time I want this customer name to show up and I fill in the vendor, then of course I can always achieve that as well. So let me just quickly show us this. So let's say I have vendor. What I'll just do is I'll select this control, which is this drop down. I need to have a condition, so I'll just copy the name of this my data card, because I can always rename this as well to maybe expense type drop down or something like that. um so this my data card, which is the container for this customer name. I can then change this visible. So let's say visible, and I want it to only be visible when I select vendor as my expense type, right? So I can say, let me select customer name now. So data card value 4 dot selected dot value is equal to, so what that means is my customer name field will only be visible when I select vendor as my expense type. So let's select a different one and see if we still see our customer name. So you can see that once I select transportation, I can't see the customer name field anymore. So I can proceed to fill other parts, but customer name is not part of the fields I can see here. If I go back to select vendor, customer name, comes back up. So that's the way you achieve that kind of um, thing when you are doing your implementation. Yeah, so I don't know if anybody has any questions so far. I know I've been doing the talking for a while now, just to be sure that everybody can still hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay, sir. So I believe there are no questions for now. All right. So yeah, so I just explained this as a vendor type. So yeah, one other thing we want to also do is to make some fields required, right? So maybe there are certain fields that, of course, if I fill an expense, I don't have my expense title, I don't have currency, I don't have amount, I didn't put my manager name, then I mean that expense would not make sense if it's submitted. So because the way it is currently, it allows me to submit this. So I can decide to just, the only required field is this one that is asterisk, which is the title. Every other thing that I have here is currently not required. So which means I can just put in an expense title and click on submit. And once I submit, it still goes to my list. But that data would not make sense, because what are you requesting for? If even when you put your title, I need to know what's the amount, what's the date of the expense, what's your manager name, because your manager needs to approve this and the person needs to get an email. And so if you don't have all of this information, then I mean, that data wouldn't make sense. And if you have even built a flow with Power Automate with it, it's probably going to fail, because it's expecting this information to perform certain functions. For example, sending an email to your manager, which is supposed to be picking from this field. So if you don't have any manager field there, then I mean, it doesn't know which who to send an email to, so that flow might fail. So one of the things we should do is also making the field required. So, okay, maybe one thing I don't know if I explained that last week, so I'll just quickly do that again. Employee name. So all of these columns, while you are creating your column on your SharePoint list, it is also possible to make certain fields required. So okay, let me just try adding a new column now. So when I'm creating my column, I have this field that says require that this column contains information, right? So if I need to make this field required, I can check this box. So which means if anybody is filling this form and they didn't put anything in this particular field, then don't allow them to submit, because it's a required field and to prompt them that you've not filled this particular information, right? So we could have as well make some of these fields required from this list. But if it's not on the from the list, you can also do that on the app to kind of enforce that to make it required. So most of the time, I prefer to use it from the app, and here is the reason. Um, there are certain fields that could be required based on condition, right? So I gave an example of this customer name where you should only fill it when your expense type is vendor. Now, in a case where your expense type is vendor, that means it is important that you put a customer name, right? Because when you are selecting a vendor, they need to know which of the vendors. So you need to now put it. So which now makes this customer name required. So if I select a different expense type, it means my customer name should not be required. But if I had created this column on the list and made it required, then I might be unable to submit my item from my app because it's expecting that the customer name is a required field and I should have information there, right? So which is why sometimes I prefer to use. So there are certain fields that you can make required, the ones that you know that at every point in time it needs to contain information. But some other ones that might be required based on certain conditions, you could leave it as optional on the SharePoint list, while on your app you can make them required. So I just want to quickly show us how to make them required. So for example, let's say employee name, which is all required. You can come to this part and go to a property called required and change this from false to true. So that means that field should be required. And you can see that once I made it true, it's automatically showed up this asterisk to show you that this field is compulsory. So I can also do that for a couple of other um other fields like expense type, my customer name. So now one other thing I do is sometimes just for validation is to disable the field, disable the button rather. So which means, let's say when I have not filled in all the required field, my um submit button is grayed out, so that with that I'm even unable to even submit. So I know that I still need to, there's still some information missing that I need to fill before my button now becomes active and I can submit. So let me just quickly show how to achieve that. So this form name is form 1. So on my submit button, if I go to the display mode, which is currently edit, right? So like I mentioned, we have 3 display mode. We have disabled, we have edit, and we have view. So it was currently on edit. I change it to disabled now. It also disables the button. So with this now, this button is graded, and even if I'm clicking, as I'm clicking now, I can't submit because it's grayed out. So, but we need it to be grayed out conditionally, which means it is only when I have not filled in all my required fields on this form, that is when this field should be grayed out. So if I change this to the condition, so if condition, the if from 1 not valid, so it means each if my form is valid, then we want it to be, we want the display mode to be edit, right? If not, it should be disabled. So the structure for an if statement is if your condition, the true value and the else value, which means if this condition is met, if it is true, what should happen? If it is false, what should happen? Right? So which, so you can see now that this button is currently grayed out because I still have a required field that I have not filled in. So if I fill in something here, so you see that it automatically turns out to be editable and I can now submit. That's because I've made this to, required. If I clear this again and say that this is required and this is currently grayed out, because I can't submit because there's still a required field. So that is the way that works. So I can go ahead and make other important fields that I feel should be required, make them required here and submit. So okay, so what we have so far, let's quickly submit a new request, for example. Yes, two. So I decide to select transportation, dollars, date of expense, manager name, or I can also select myself as for now. So if you want to also make the attachment field compulsory, so if it's also important that any request you are making, you need to put an evidence or a receipt or something, you can make that required as well if there's a need for it. So let me submit this. So you can see that once I submitted, it took me to this screen, which showed me that my request was successfully completed. So that is based on what we did the other time, where we added our um our unsuccess property. We added some function on our unsuccess property of the form, which means when the form is successfully submitted, it should navigate to this screen, it should reset form and all of that. Right. So let me remove this guy. Okay, so which took us to this guy to show that it has been successfully completed. One thing I just want to do here is to have a button that takes us back to the home screen. So which means navigate to the screen one, the home screen. And we call this maybe okay. Right. So if I click on this, so it takes me back to this screen. So this one, can call it login or something. And tell it to navigate. Don't mind all this, my blur riots. Still fix all of that later on. So login to. Okay, so we can see now that this form is now showing up as a new form, and I can now go ahead to fill a new request and also submit. Yes, sir. So yeah, I don't know if anybody has any question at this point, or if this is still making any sense, or are we confused? Hello.
Hi, Babatunde.
Yes, I.
Thank you very much for this what you have taken us through so far. So I would want to ask a question, and it is to that screen. I think screen two, the screen where we have the form, where you exactly where you pulled the employee name from the Active Directory. So I want to ask that there is a user function in Power Apps. Can that user function stand as a substitute to the function you wrote to pull that?
Okay. Thank you. So the function on, okay, I think I should have mentioned that. So there's a function on Power Apps actually called user. So with that, you can put the user's email. So there are three major properties that you can pull for a user: the user email, the user um plain name, and the user image. So if I type in user, so this one does not require that I add a new connector. It already exists on Power Apps by default. So if I put user open bracket and close bracket and I put dots, I'll see these three um values that I can pull. I can pull the email of the user, the full name, and the image. So those are the three attributes that I can pull. So which will still return the same thing as when I use my Office 365 user dot my profile dot display name, right? So this also works if you are using um if what you are trying to reference is maybe just a single line of text. So let's say I just created this employee name. I just need the display name of the person, right? Though I prefer to use a person's field in this kind of scenario, the reason is because when we get to our Power Automate, we see more reason why we are using this, because this has a lot more attributes about that user, right? From here, I can get the person's name, I can get your email, I can get your department, I can get your job title and co. Right? So rather than having to create 3 or 4 different columns. So if I want to pick the employee name and I want to say, okay, maybe I need those 4 attributes, and I want to create employee name and I'll put one for display name, create another single line of text for email, another single line for job title, another one for department. So rather than having that, this single column, which is a person's field, can cover for all of that attributes that I need. So now, which is why all this my long formula that I have here, will help me pull in all of that information. So this part where we have my profile.mail, it could also still be same thing as the um, user.email, right? This part I have user display name could also be pulling the user dot full name, right? But there's like from the user now, like I mentioned, there are only 3 attributes that you can fetch. So it doesn't have all the different attributes. So this Office 365 users connector is more extensive. So it has a lot more attributes than the default user function. So with this one, I can pull your job title, I can pull the department, I can pull several other information, your phone number and everything, as long as it's configured on the AD anyways. So I can pull all of that information. So which is why I prefer to use this most of the time. But of course, if you just need the user email or user full name or user image, the user function also suffice.
Okay,
I hope that
thank
makes
you very
sense.
much. Yes, it does. Secondly, is that please expand the formula bar.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So here we have a number of attributes already: email, display name, picture,
Yep.
and all of those. Why is it
Yep.
that the field there is picking the display name? Is Have we specified that it should pick the display name?
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah. So what happens is this on a so this person's field, like I think I mentioned that last week, we have different types of controls. We have label, we have button, we have text inputs, we have drop down, combo box, and the likes. So when we pulled this last week, when we inserted the form, it automatically populates all the different columns that we had on our list on this form, right?
Yes.
So when it populated this, it's also intelligent enough to pull the right control based on the data type that you have declared on your SharePoint list. So for the one that is single line of text, it automatically brings a single line of text. For one that is employee name, it's showing as a combo box, right?
Mm.
Same for the one that is a choice field. Same for dates. You can see it's also showing as a date picker, right?
Mm.
So it has that kind of intelligence to pull the kind of control. So for employee name, the type of control it uses is a combo box. So that combo box can have, so if I okay, so manager name is also a person's field, which is also a combo box. So I'll use that as an example. So if I search for any this thing here, you see that I can see the name, I can see the email, and I can see the image,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
So let me search for this thing, my own that has a picture. So you can see this, my name, profile, picture, and the email. So a combo box is more than, so the difference between a combo box, right, and a drop down is that, because that thing could also be a little confusing. So here now you could also have a drop down. which also shows more like a combo box. So this one now, you can see that is a drop down that shows
Yeah.
me list of options that I have. I could also use a drop down for this function, but major difference between combo box and drop down is that for a combo box, you can have more than one value encompassed in that particular column. So, like I mentioned on employee name, from this employee name, I can pull your name, I can pull your department, I can pull your job title and likes, right? So this is actually showing a lot, is pulling a lot of different information together. But you will now put which one will be a primary one that will be displayed here. So let's try and use this manager name as an example. If I go to this edit field, yes, so you can see the image will show the picture, the primary text. Yes, so this primary text now, if I change this to email, then my email is what will be showing here and not my. So let me search now. So if I search now, it's going to be showing me my email. So you can see that it's showing me email instead of the display name as is being displayed there. So I
Yeah.
can actually decide which one of my attributes should be displayed here, right? But it only makes more sense to use the name, because the name is what almost anyone can relate to it, right? So when you are seeing the employee name and you are saying, so not everybody in your organization will know your email address by head, but when they see your name, they can easily identify with that. So, but of course, if there is a use case for you to now be, if you want the email to be displayed, of course, you can always change it from what I just showed.
Okay.
So this primary text is, so I can change it even to job title or department and all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot for that.
All right, sir.
And
Any
is there
other
a way we
question?
could access
Yeah.
that code to study it better?
Okay, yeah, I think I'll share that. Maybe is David on the call? So maybe while he's posting the video, maybe I'll give him the code so he can add it maybe as a comment on the video or something.
Yeah, the video will be shared after, maybe during the course of the week. It will be shared with everyone. Mm.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you, please.
All
all
right.
right.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Do we have any other questions? Okay. Yeah, so I think we've kind of overshoot our time, but because it started late. So
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much today. We really enjoyed the session today, and I'm sure that every other person is also enjoyed it. And you did justice to the questions also. So thank you everyone for making it to this session today. And I hope to see you next week when we continue the training. So thank you everyone. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you too.
Thank you. Thanks for the training.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
all right, thank you.